Peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome to Goldenlite Academy. I'm Dr. James B. Golden, and I am so excited to be here today to get into our leadership series. One of the things about Golden Global, this company that was really given to me, is this concept and this idea that we need to be able to move our nation forward and to be able to help us evolve as human beings. And my choice is using what God has given me, which is a lifetime of leadership experience. And so it's a huge part of what we do at Golden Global Enterprises is we help leaders to become servant leaders, to become transformational leaders, and to become alchemical leaders. We want people who are actually out here doing the work that's going to make our planet better, that's going to help our people, that's going to bring about justice. And so I'm really excited today to be able to talk to somebody who I consider a major change maker in leadership, in mentorship. And before I do that, leadership isn't just about titles. And I've written about this on LinkedIn. It's not just about titles, it's about the impact that we make. It's about the resilience that we carry. It's about making sure that we pull others up with us, that we're not just taking from this world back to it. So, we're talking about transformational leadership today. I love transformational leadership. It includes this idea of mentorship, and it matters even more today than it did before. Now, having said that, happy Black History Month. And I encourage you guys to drop your thoughts, questions, comments in the chat. I know that some of you will be watching live on LinkedIn. Some of you will be watching live on our new YouTube page. If you're not following us on YouTube, follow the Golden Global Enterprises YouTube. I got like 48 followers, and I feel really proud of that. I love all 48 of my followers on YouTube, but we're going to be pushing out some great content. I first met Dr. Brown as a freshman at CSUN, and I was a little bit older. I was the Black Student Union president. Happy Black History Month. Shout out to the Black Alumni Association. Shout out to the Black House and the Black Student Union and all of the organizations at CSUN that lift up our people. But I met Dr. Brown as a freshman at CSUN. Later on, I became his boss. And that was a wild ride. We had a lot of fun together. We worked with juveniles who and mostly Black and brown youth who were adjudicated and who were in Los Angeles juvenile halls. And Dr. Brown went and he got his doctorate in industrial psychology in organizational management and consulting. I entered that program. And so we both have the same doctorate degree. We went through the same program, and he really inspired me to get in, finish, and do some work in industry. And then later on, Dr. Brown came in and I opened TTC College, and he came in as one of our first instructors in our substance use program. I started to see Dr. Brown make a name for himself throughout the community, teaching at our alma mater, Cal State University Northridge, in multiple departments, multiple classes. And I know that his students really love him. Back in the day, we used to have this thing called Rate My Professor. Now, I don't know if they still have Rate My Professor, but Rate My Professor is where, for those of you who are Gen Z, that's where you could actually give a real evaluation of your instructors in college. And we used to tear that site up, and I mean it would last for years. You would be able to see the classes that were taken and everything. Dr. Brown's ratings are consistently high, so I'm not surprised. It's excellent work. When I was getting ready to talk about transformational leadership and where we're at today, there was a song that came to my head, and I know everybody knows Janet Jackson. She's from the incredible Jackson family, the first family of music. And everybody knows Rhythm Nation, but I'm not sure that everybody knows that she was a prophet. We call her Prophetess Janet. Janet wrote this song with the legendary Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis called State of the World. And as we sit today and think about what we're going through in our nation and in our world, I don't think that it's an accident that this song is still relevant. And it really tempers our discussion today. Janet said, "This young and homeless boy feels his life is worthless. Instead of suicide, he cries himself to sleep. And it's happening to this world we live in. There's got to be a better way. Drugs and crime spreading on the streets. People can't find enough to eat. Now our kids can't go out and play. That's the state of the world today." The problem is that that wasn't today. She wrote that song over 30 years ago. And it's unfortunate that today we are still dealing with the same issues around homelessness, around lack of support for youth, lack of support for communities of color, lack of access to treatment, and lack of leadership support. And so this is going to be really important for us today to dig into is how do we transform the state of this world? And we need to get to a place where our actions as leaders helps us to not have to repeat the same conversation 10 years from now to say that Janet Jackson's song is still relevant. Let's get into it. I'll see y'all in a second. All right, everybody. Now, let's do that good virtual hand clap. Executive consultant, behavioral health residential director, diversion manager, director of housing, adjunct professor of TTC College, adjunct professor of Cal State University Northridge, director of Friends of the Children, and my brother and one of my closest friends. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Dr. Carroll J. Brown the third.
What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? Yo.
I don't know how we got you on here. You know, we're just the little guys at Golden Global Enterprises. You're all around the world. You're speaking at conferences and consulting with people all over. Dr. Brown, who are you? Why are you here?
That was a powerful question.
As soon as it came out, I was like, "Oh, that was really powerful."
Yeah. How to start with that? In honor of Black History Month, I am the hope and the dream of the slave. Who I am, right? I am the person who my grandparents prayed for, right? Who they covered with. I am the person that stands on the shoulders of giants, right? I am the person who likes the idea of Sankofu to go back and reach back to bring forward for those who are behind. I am the product of my ancestors. I am the product of my father and my mother. I am a brother. I am a husband. I am an uncle. I am a son. I am a Black man. I am a person who inspires change, but I also like to see the change in others, right? There's a quote: look at a man or woman the way that they are, they only become worse. Look at them as if they were what they could be. Then they become what they should be, right? And that's who I am, a person who has had so many people reach into me and pour into me for me to continue to pour into others, to continue to help uplift and run with this torch of so many who have ran before us, to continue to keep it going, to create change in our world as we see so much is going on, especially in our city. As you see, I'm wearing for LA.
We see it.
Right.
It's very Kendrick Lamar of you.
Right. And so just to uplift and continue upholding our community values, right? My father always, I like to say I am the product of a single black man raised in South Central LA. And my father always told me, if it is to be, it's up to me. And that's who I am. I'm a product of my father and my father's father.
So I just feel like we're probably this feels emotional already. You know, like you said
I
something
will
I
try
see,
not to go there, but it's
and I
Black
see
History
what
Month.
God is trying to do right now because I am is the most powerful affirmation that you can ever speak. I just got chills. And
Hmm.
to hear you say that, it reminds me of all of the men who look like us that were here in this country trying to prove that they were just a man.
Hmm.
You saw those "I am a man" posters
Hmm.
and those marches. Like that's the stock that we come from,
Hmm.
being the descendants of um, enslaved Africans in this country who built this country, and to be able to make that kind of a statement declaratively
Hmm.
today is powerful.
And it speaks to the power of the tongue, right? Because we look at it, right? Words are meaning and definitive. And even the Bible talks about the power of the tongue. And so when you look at the I am, right? Even God himself says, I am who I am, right? I am the great I am. And so even invoking that into ourselves continues to build and lift us up to be the version of ourselves that we may not even know that we can be. So that's what I try
Well,
to
now we see why you're already, you're in this field. You're a mentor
do.
because you're already speaking life into people. And when I think about today, the big question for today is, what does it mean to lead with purpose,
Mm,
especially in times when leadership is crucial?
yeah.
Today, leadership is more crucial than I think it's ever been in my entire lifetime. And I've been on this planet for 40 years, but it feels like we need leaders now more than we ever have. And we had some phenomenal leaders growing up. We had Julian Bond. We come from a lineage of leaders that includes, Malcolm X, who's my hero, but Marcus Garvey, going back to Du Bois. We can also talk about Angela Davis, Fannie Lou Hamer. We could talk
Hmm.
about Dorothy Height. We could talk about Coretta Scott King. I mean, we come from a long line of leaders who have given their lives in service to our people. And
Mm.
so today, I that's what I want to talk to you about is, what does it mean to lead with purpose, and especially in this time that's critical. Now, we're talking about transformational leadership. There's a million different leadership styles. Now, these leadership styles come from Western thought.
Mm.
And what I'm not going to do today is get canceled. But I will say that I like some of the stuff that we learned about different leadership styles. There's autocratic leaders. We see a
Hmm.
lot of those today who are these power hungry. I need my name is all this, and you need to bow down to me. And not in the Beyonce bow down kind of way, but more so in the current administration bow down kind of way.
And employees, you see, and in businesses, I see a lot of laissez-faire leaders, right? And those are leaders who just give it all to every. Like when you look at, you know, the um, the leaders of major organizations like Amazon and Tesla and stuff like that, they delegate things to employees and rely on their own expertise and experience and um, allow those people to help get them to where they need to be. So we see a
Right.
lot of those things, and I'll touch on this real quick. You said something in regards to purpose, and I do like to let people know there's two important days in your life as we jump into leadership, right? Two of those important days are when you're born and when you learn why, and that speaks to purpose, right? What is your purpose in life? And and a lot of times I like to ask myself, when you find your purpose, we all know about Maslow, and you get to that peak, right? That top, that self-actualization. And a lot of times we forget that when you're at the bottom of that pyramid of your needs, you're looking up, getting through the different levels of your needs. And when you get to that peak, your vision and your scope is widened even more.
Mm,
And so that's a part for you to figure out what is your purpose in life, and life is God's gift to us, and how we live our life is our gift to God. And what are we doing with that? Have you found your purpose, and are you driven by it? And you named quite a few ancestors, and I was talking with some youth one day, and we had a conversation, and someone said something, and because the youth will teach you things, and they
immediately.
they will teach you some stuff. They are educators in their own right. And one of them said, it's crazy to think I'm gonna be someone's ancestor, and we are all gonna be someone's ancestor,
Powerful.
right? And it's, what kind of ancestor are you gonna be? Are you going to, when people remember who you are and the impact you created in this world,
Right
what
there.
are you going to be known for? Right? What kind of ancestor do you want to be? And I think that ties into the different leadership styles, right? That you mentioned. And I know for me, the topic of this conversation, transformational leadership is huge. And when we look at, for me, also transformation tied in with servant leadership, right? Servant
That's
leadership.
my bag. You know
Yeah,
that.
you know what I
That's
mean?
my
But
bag is
it's
servant
the
leadership.
ones to go to fall into when you look at the other ones. I mean, everyone can tie into a little bit, but when those are your foundational core pieces, you know, I I look at youth and I tell them, I say, when we go in different communities, I'm like, what do these houses have in common? And they're like, oh, windows. And I'm like, no, let's look deeper, right? And they all have foundations, right? They
Wow.
all have, when you break down the exterior all the way down to the interior of the house, you will see the frame, you will see the molding, you will see the beams, you will see
Wow.
the ground that it's set in on. And what is your foundation? And when we look at that foundation as a leader, what is your leadership style? And for me, it's, I fall in between transformational and servant leader, and those two go hand in hand. And
They do.
trying to help people be their best versions of themselves, right? And
Now,
yeah.
servant leadership is rooted in the fundamental principle that you serve your employees. You serve the people who are working for you so that they can actualize the mission and the vision of your company. And so I do lean the heaviest in that place, which is interesting. As mentors, I think a lot of mentors can become servant leaders, but mentorship is one of the four pillars of transformational leadership. And so when
Hmm.
I think about transformational leadership, I always think about mentors. You know,
Hmm.
there's the four pillars of transformational leadership. It is mentorship, it's innovation.
Hmm.
My favorite thing in the world is emotional intelligence, which we need a lot more of that today. And then what I think will move us forward as a species is vision.
Hmm.
And putting those four things together, you have an incredible leader who is able to not only transform the teams that they work with and pour into the individuals that they serve, but to have this bigger, brighter vision for the future. You know,
Hmm.
a future where nobody has to go hungry. Because
Hmm.
when you think about it, we have enough food on this planet for
Right.
everybody. So how is it that hunger exists at all?
Hmm.
Like when you just stop and think about that, it doesn't make sense. It does not make sense that in a world where there is adequate housing, some families that are smaller have these giant compounds, and then you start to think, why are people on the street in Los Angeles?
Mm. Yeah. Yep. And a lot of people are more focused on themselves and what can they do. And I think, the greats, the change agents in this world, and that's why I like to say, like, my job is to help create more agents of change, um, and how to help those people become more assets in our community versus liabilities, and how do we pour into those people. And as a person who likes to lead with transformational leadership, I come in it with a servant mindset and a servant heart, right? And I think that that's also part of that core, because when you look at the vision, right, your vision is given to you from God to help empower others, and not with the idea of how can this benefit me, but how can this benefit you to
Wow.
as a person, right? And to do that, you have to be a servant of the community that you are a part of. And community isn't just where you live, it's the culture you are in. It's the your peer, your demographics and things like that. And how are you adding to that from a place of the heart, right? As a servant to the work that you do. And it's a beautiful thing when you can help someone transform into the versions of themselves that they never even thought that they can be, especially
Wow.
within our youth population. Seeing them have these eye-opening moments. I've seen kids who, we talked about Maslow earlier, and who had no vision of themselves to be poured into by me or other Black men, who are involved in mentoring, and to be accepted into college, to graduate high school, to even, I bring them to college campuses to see sun, and they've never thought that they could even dream of doing something like that. And it was interesting. I had a young man. He was 13, had been shot 10 times, and mind you, 13, he's about 5'2", and weighed about all of
Mm.
125. And I'm like, yo, what's going on? And he looked at me, he said, "You a doctor?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "You don't look like no doctor." And I was like, "Why do you say that?" He's like, "Cuz you don't look and talk like one." And then he said, "Shit, I could be a doctor." And I said, "That's the
You
purpose of me
can.
being here." I was like, "You actually
It,
can."
it as you're talking now, I know we're supposed to be talking about Issa Rae right now, but one of the things that
Shout out to Issa. Hey, I'm trying to get into Somerville, her new restaurant
okay, well,
over
let's
on
do Issa
Slauson
for
and
a second because
Overhill.
you know that's my girl. Now we're in Los Angeles, and one of the things I love about Issa, Issa's a millennial. She actually went to school with one of our friends, and she went to school in Watts. I think
Mm,
that Issa is a great representative of transformational leadership. This is somebody who
hmm
I think Issa's amassed this incredible following, but she's a community centered leader. And she's somebody who
hmm
said, I'm going to take my show, my big show, Insecure, and I'm going to
hmm
promote Black businesses that are not being seen on international stages. And I see people now
hmm
come to LA and they want to stop by Randy's. They want to go to Lamert
hmm
Park. They're trying to be in downtown Inglewood. That's transformative.
hmm
When I think about Stubio, I just got chills through my whole body. When I think about Stubios, which is her partnership with Tubi. Now, some people will shade Tubi. Tubi gives a lot of Black creators Happy Black History Month. There's some good stuff on
It's
Tubi. We're not going
entertainment.
to disrespect Tubi today. We're not.
And also, to Issa's point, to your point of Issa helping out Black businesses, I'll go a step further in Black artists. And so when you look at her show, there was times I was sitting there watching the show, and it's great because me and my wife would have dialogue after each episode, and just from a relational standpoint of perspective of a man and a woman, and we would have conversations, sit down, because even after Issa's show, after every episode, they would have the wind down,
That was
and
the
so
point.
we would have our own wind down, and we would sit down and dialogue about, so what'd you think about this person, what'd you think about that situation, that scenario. But what a lot of people may not have paid attention to is the soundtrack of every episode had local artists too. Because I would sit there, it'd be bumping. I'd be like, okay, this is so I would Shazam the song, and it would be some low key. And then I would go to their Instagram
Yeah.
page, and I'm like, oh, okay, wow, this is a dope little
And then on top
soundtrack.
of that,
Every
then you
episode.
have the writers. All of her writers that she
Mm-hmm,
was bringing in, and she wasn't just bringing in sort of these classic writers. Yes, it was great to
mm-hmm,
see people that Shonda Rhimes has also supported in the industry, but she was bringing in new writers that had never been able to get a platform to write on television. I hope that Issa realizes that she's living Black history. She is the living Black History Month. And there are so many artists and business owners and leaders who I think are also Black history. I think that you are Black history. In We're in the flesh. This is happening right now. And for me, I always think about as a leader in education, I always think about the table that Booker T. Washington and Mary McLeod Bethune would sit at. And I
Mm.
think of them as these gods, these larger than life figures who did something. And then when I sit and realize these were just people who were trying to
Hmm.
do better, they were us.
Yeah,
That's Black
absolutely.
history, and that is transformational
Mm.
leadership. So we salute you, Issa, and the work that she's doing with studios, allowing young creatives to
Right.
actually bring their films to life. That's the kind of work that we need. Now, I want to ask you a couple things. Who were your mentors? I want to talk a little bit about mentorship. This is something that's really big for you. Who were your mentors, and how did they influence your personal leadership style?
Um, I would say if I'm looking from a historical context, one of the people that really was a mentor, just based off of their objectification, they hated, right, the norm and went against society and wanted to create change at a young age was Huey P. Newton.
Ooh,
Um,
people don't talk about Brother Newton that much.
you know
That's
what I'm
the
saying?
homeboy.
And you know what? And I'm gonna put some respect on it, Dr. Huey P. Newton, right? And so
Dr. Newton was not playing games
he
with
wasn't.
anyone at
He
any
wasn't.
point and in any time.
And if you look at the people in his camp, they all were about that. You know what I mean? Fred Hampton, what? Like some of those
Bobby
people,
Seale.
crazy, right? And so they all young men in their 20s doing this work, right? Creating ideals and helping uplift the community and doing boots to ground work. Those were
When I met Bobby Seale
mm,
early on, this is before he passed away, and I remember, it was a small class, and he came and talked to our class, and in my mentor, Dr. Stanford's class, and um, he said, we weren't trying to be these big legends. We were just trying to take care of our community. It's transformational. So I love that you're lifting up the names of these brothers and sisters. We could put Angela Davis in there as well. And
you know, and when people when we think of Black history, sometimes like yeah, you'll see the face, but everyone goes to the Martin Luther Kings, the Malcolm X's, Rosa Parks, and not trying to say that they didn't do anything, but there was a group in Southern California, in Northern California, out here making things happen. Because California has its history, right? There's some places in California that were sundown towns.
oh, people don't know.
They don't know Glendale, Culver City, right? These are places that like you could not go to after and be in and whatnot. And so these brothers came in and really created some monumental change in the world that we see, and it was just monumental to me.
How did their mentorship or there's what you pulled from them? What did you put into your own leadership style? What did you put into your own work?
Resilience, right? The idea of not never giving up, determination, education was huge. And for me, education wasn't even when I first started, um, and I was young, and education wasn't really a focus for me. It was more so how to figure out who am I, right? Because
Mm.
this young Black boy and trying to figure out who and what space do I align in. And it's crazy because I now add emotional intelligence into the stuff that I teach and that I work with other youth now, because I didn't learn about it until I was 30.
Right.
And I'm meeting 18, 17-year olds, even 13-year olds, and I'm like, let's talk about self-awareness. What comes up for you? Who are you as a person? And how are you being impacted by the things around you and understanding that impact? And so, their resiliency um, helped uplift me. And then, you know, being strengthened by, one of my top mentors, my father, right? And like I
Yes.
always uplift my father because society always tell the story of the absentee father, right? And
Yes.
they always media portrays this as, black men don't take care of their kids, they don't. And so being raised by one in South Central in the 90s, and be and having him work two jobs and me staying away from drugs and alcohol, and him sacrificing to make sure that we had no, we didn't ask for anything, right? We, of course, as kids you ask for stuff, but he made sure that we didn't have any lack of, and he still was there to provide and to be a strong black male in our life. Hell, we were more afraid of him than the streets. And it wasn't that we were afraid of him,
I
but we were
I
afraid to
completely
let him down.
overstand.
We were afraid. I think looking back, I was afraid more to let him down, and what that would look like to be able to let down my father. And so those strong men, and even when I look at older pictures of my father who was around in that time, he was inspired by those members, and even uplifting some of the stories. My father was also one of those change agents. He went to Hollywood High in the 1960s,
I know
and
that was off the chain.
oh man, they they look at him because he was like the captain of the football team. He was like this black man who came there. Um, he's a Creole boy. He had full head of hair, out running everybody, out lifting and working out and things like that. And he was caught swimming in a pool um, of a white woman's house. And he's thinking like, this is my friend and everything like that. Neighbors told, they chased him out of the neighborhood, and he still led with as a servant in that community and uplifted everyone and people. And to this day, they still remember him. I get
Of
email,
course.
they email me right now, wanting to invite me to their 55th class reunion to represent as my father, to be there for my father. And it's
What
so
you know what?
crazy because back
What
then they didn't even spell his name right in the yearbook.
I just as you're talking, we talked about ancestors earlier. It's Black History Month.
Hmm.
What an incredible legacy
Hmm.
that your father has left through you
Hmm.
and through the work that he did. I remember this was, towards the end of your dad's life, and I just got chills thinking about it. You were the keynote speaker
Hmm.
for I don't know which graduation it was, but one of our graduations for TTC College.
Hmm.
It was a really big deal,
Hmm.
to have for our students to see a black doctor,
Hmm.
talking to them at all. But I remember looking at your dad and watching him watch you give the speech that would inspire our students who
Hmm.
also come from underprivileged backgrounds, and how proud he was to see his son on stage. And it was, I could almost, if I could write what he was thinking, I imagine that he was thinking like, this was a life well lived.
Absolutely. And he later passed right at the year after, and that was on his and I remember what you were saying, and that was the second graduation of TTC, the college. That was their second year two graduation. Um and so that was his 70th birthday. I brought
Wow.
him. And I brought him because I always
Yes.
brought him around for different speaking engagements, but for me, um I was like, hey, if I'm doing this, speaking to new counselors who are coming, my dad used to be an addict, right? And so he was sober for X amount of years, for over 40 years. And so he attests in, I even found his old NA book, and he had, because he stayed in rehab. He went to a rehab facility and he stayed there. He had an NA book, and people wrote him letters in the book, like a yearbook, saying, "Good luck. I'm proud of you. You inspired me." And these things like that. And he always contests to NA, helped changed his life. And it was because of those counselors helped him become the man that he needed to be to help me become the man that I needed to be. So it was a full circle moment for these new counselors to grow, to see what their impact can create
Wow.
in the lives of people. And so because of them, people like they stand on the shoulders of those who helped change hit my dad's life, and he helped change my life. And I wouldn't be who I am without them. And so for me, it was like I got to bring him to this graduation for his birthday, to celebrate, because he would have it. He didn't have it no other way, and he was too over the
Oh
moon.
yeah, he was there. He
He
was
was
sharp.
excited, you know what I mean, and he was enjoying himself and everything. And my speech was about him and saying like, thank
Oh,
you to
man.
you guys for helping him, and that was his thank you to them. You know, so
I mean,
it was an awesome experience.
what an incredible light, and we speak his name and remember his legacy. And I know he's all over this right now, and his spirit is here. Like, yeah, I did that.
Absolutely.
Y'all are welcome. Y'all are welcome, world. Yeah, and your dad, is an example of a powerful black man in many ways. I think one of the things that we talked about in this getting ready for this moment is some of the unique challenges for and barriers for black men that we face in leadership. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that I knew our challenges until I got into some really high level leadership roles, and I was like, oh, there's a lot more going on here. I was like, racism looks very different today. There's things happening that I didn't even think. I mean, I've been through all kinds of stuff, and I write about that in my weekly newsletter. It's very cathartic for me, and it's full of teas. So I hope if you guys are watching, definitely check out my newsletter. But there's a couple things that I think about. One are the stereotypes and biases that people have about black men in leadership. In particularly, the Harvard Business Review in 2022 did a study that found that black men are less likely to be promoted to leadership roles just off the top, which is interesting when you have anti DEI initiatives where it's like, okay, well, what data are you all looking at? Because we're not being promoted into the spots that you're talking about at all. And then McKinsey last year did a study where they found that 67% of Black professionals don't have access to a mentor or sponsor in their leadership roles.
Mm-hmm.
And so historically, I've had to find my own mentors. I've had to pay for coaches and find people who could actually talk to me about what it's like to be a black man in these spaces, which is what I really needed mentorship on. And the last thing that I think we experience is a high level of burnout and imposter syndrome. There's this isolation when you are I'm speaking from my experience, but from my experience, there is a strong lack of just inclusiveness, and so we're isolated in our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
There's some stuff that's not safe for us to say. So should black leaders always represent our entire community? Do we need to do things to help us to deal with the stereotypes, the biases, the emotional toll? And I'm wondering from your perspective, what kind of advice would you give to a black leader entering into a big leadership role today?
So you said a lot, and we're gonna break some of that down. And I think that it's important to not pass over some of those things, because those things are relevant and they're
Yeah,
impactful, especially when looking from a black male perspective, in the field. And sometimes being a black male in these spaces, especially leadership, like you said, racism looks a whole lot different, right? It looks like a microaggression.
pretty. It's pretty though, like it's a lot of
Right? It's like,
smiles.
and it's a lot of smiles, and it's a lot of um oh, you got your doctorate, and tone is key, right? When we look at words, I was just telling this to some youth. I taught this in a class that communication isn't necessarily just the words that we speak, right? Part of that is tone. And when we listen to the tone of some people, it's like there's an undertone of racism in there. And some people don't even understand their bias, especially when they talk to you. Or, oh, Dr. Golden is always defensive, or he doesn't
I've heard
understand,
that.
or every time you try to challenge someone, now you're being argumentative, right? I've even had it where I've been asked not to introduce myself as Dr. Brown.
I've had that as
and
well.
I and I'm just like, wow, okay, and I think
No, listen. So I was told. Can I say? I was told that they only refer to the doctors at Kaiser as doctors. And when I tell you I had an out of body experience, nobody cared though. And that's the funnier thing. It's like it didn't bother people because they're
mm,
like, well, I mean, why should we call you a doctor? Um,
mm,
and I don't even know if that's racism, probably is, but
it's silly.
it's just it's that piece. We carry a lot of things that people don't see. You know,
And it sucks because to find strong leadership, I know, and I have some brothers that I lean in on for support, and that help me. And a strong circle of black men. Dr. Golden's included into that circle where we tap into each other. But individually, I think the strongest leadership and mentorship that I found and that I continuously find in different spaces is from a black woman.
wow.
And there's been numerous black women in different spaces because they're constantly overlooked, right? Underrepresented. And
I mean, what they go through is much worse than what we go through.
I mean, I promise you. And so I have so many strong black women who are doctors in my circle, and it's amazing because I expose numerous youth to them. Um, and because growing up, I wasn't exposed to that many doctors like that. I didn't know, and so to have these women that I can talk to, that hell, even my wife is a doctor, right?
I was just about to say that your wife is one.
You're right. And so a great friend who's a sister to us, Dr. Brandy Reed, right? Like people like her, they speak life into us. And sometimes you, as a male, as a black man, you need that to speak life into you and to continue to keep you going, right? And to because when we step from the out in into our community, and to have these black women speak life into us is
Yeah.
monumental. And I know from it, there's an example. I was doing a training and I was like, hey, my name is Carroll Brown and blah blah blah, and I did a good job, right? And I'm getting to a space of being like, yeah, I did that, right? And so um, I had an older woman come to me, and I tell this story to every black doctor that I meet. I had an older black woman come to me. She said, "Young man, you did an amazing job." I said, "Thank you, sister." She says, "I have a question for you." I said, "Okay, sure. It's about the presentation." She said, "Yeah. How come you introduce yourself as Carroll Brown?" And I said, "Huh?" I said, "Well, that's my name." She said, "Well, it said doctor on there." And I said, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm a doctor." And she says, "Well, why didn't you say Dr. Brown?" And I said, "Well, I'm just trying to, I'm not trying to be high on my horse or anything like that." And she says, "Okay, I have a question for you." I said, "Yeah." She says, "I'm probably old enough to be your grandmother, or maybe your great grandmother." I said, "Yes, you are." I said, um, she said, "Do you think I went through everything I went through in the civil rights for you to not call yourself doctor?" I said, "Huh?" I said, "Wait, what?" She said, "No. Do you think that everything we went through during that time in segregation, we went through what we went through for you to be here to call yourself doctor? Don't you ever dim your light for others." And I said, "Oh my Jesus!" And like I was like, "You spoke into my heart, my soul." Right? She spoke and she uplifted me as a black woman. She uplifted me as a black man, and that was powerful, right? And to this day, like when I go out and speak, like I stand firm into who I am because of people like them,
Yeah.
and because it helped because they fought against so much more. And now we can publicize it, social media and things like that, and the Karens and we can write up to HR. Back then, their HR was like, "You niggas are not supposed to be here," right?
Mm.
And so, it's just remembering that and finding those people to help continue to speak life into you, because this world, um,
Wow.
this country wasn't meant for us, right? And so when we go back, we stood strong for each other, and that's what we have to continue to do. So when I find myself dealing with some of those things, I lean back into my circle.
I just realized something as you're talking that is it's unique because we have to look for people who will pour into us, and I do find that at home. I do find it, among our friends and family. And my big mentor is Dr. Karen Stanford. She's been my mentor for over 20 years.
Hmm.
And she's going to be on this show in a couple of weeks, but
Oh,
um, Dr. Stanford has been that for so
uh,
many youth, so many young college students, black college students. One, we looked at her and we were like, you are somebody who lives what you talk about. You are a major historian. You've worked in the field of criminal justice, of civil rights for so long, and you've practiced what you preached. But
hmm
then I've also seen her go out of her way to make sure that we advanced,
hmm
and I saw her do it selflessly. And it's always a great conversation with Dr. Sanford.
love
But
it.
her mentorship, I think, has been the foundation of so many of my peer group. And we have an incredible group of peers. I mean, look at the work that Jasmine's doing
Hmm.
at UC Riverside and really around the world.
Yep.
Dr. Young.
Yep.
You think about Alexandria, when we
Hmm.
think about, God bless Patrice, our departed sister, who we speak her name, who was also a mentor to me,
Hmm.
Sean Hill and Estella. There are so many of us who really stand on her shoulders. And I try to tell her all the time, the power of mentorship is the people that you see winning
Hmm.
image awards and getting their doctorates and opening businesses and changing the world. And I know that Forbes said 91% of people with mentors report being happier in their careers. The NAACP says Black youth with strong mentors are 55% more likely to pursue leadership roles.
Hmm.
I wonder for you, you work with a lot of young Black men, a lot of youth, and you mentor them, and it's very intentional. I want to know from you, what's the best way to identify and nurture future leaders?
It's interesting, right? And I'm gonna tap in on your uplifting of Dr. Stanford, because she actually wrote my letter of rec for grad school to get in my doctorate program. So she's been a huge mentor to me too. I think it's meeting people where they're at, right? Your job as a mentor isn't to, and this is what I train people who are working with our youth, especially our population. We can't subscribe to Eurocentric ideology when working with our Black and brown youth, right? We have to meet them at their core. And
Yes.
I speak to their foundation, right? We talked about foundation earlier, and a part of their DNA, right? When we look at our Black and brown youth, we come from villages, we come from kings and queens, both black and brown, right? We come from royalty. And trying to sit there and diagnose them in a room, in a box, does not speak to them. And so getting them outside of their norm, taking them to the beach, taking them to the park, having conversations, speaking life into them, I've seen so much change within them, because going outside of what we were taught, we were trained. I remember at and mind you, I love the organization. They taught me so much, opened up Rancho had opened up so many doors in learning, but some of the things is like, that's not always the case. We're taught, no, you can't give this youth a hug, but actually this kid needs a hug.
To
That's what he needs the
survive, like literal survival.
I've given the hardest of thugs a hug, and feel them, and you can just feel a release, like, I needed this, right? And that speaks to the person in them, and that speaks to their ancestors within them, because we operated by that. We operated with that transactional piece of engaging with each other. And so being able to see that and be a
Dr.
part of
Brown, I'm having a moment
those.
because we've been socialized as Black men to be hard. And what I've realized is our brothers, they need love. They
Hmm.
need genuine love from each other. Um, we need to be able to say, I love you and mean it. We need to be
Hmm.
able to give hugs and nurture each other. You
Yep.
know, it has nothing to do with masculinity. It has nothing to do with any of this. It's survival. We need that to be able to survive.
Hmm. I
And
went
I
to
remember you
recently.
did. This is what you've been doing for all
Absolutely.
these years. You were doing that at Rancho, damn
Giving
near
kids
20
hugs.
years ago.
Getting in trouble too. Like, see, you can't hug this kid. Nah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna still. He needs it. Like, kids are breaking down crying because we've had conversations about his mother or parent died, and just being able to just hold them in an embrace means so much. I just recently went into South LA, and in a heavy, what one would feel is a heavy gang populated area, and I met with a friend who, he did some time for a minute, and he's out and changing his life, and wants to speak to young kids and things like that, and we're working on some things. And afterwards, he had a whole paradigm shift, and we played chess, and we sat and talked about mental health and what
Wow.
changed for him. And so in his living room, just he and I, right? And afterwards, when I had to leave, I gave him a hug and I held him, and I gave him a hard embrace and told him, I see you. And I just want to know, I want you to know I'm proud of you. And I can feel just the overall aura of the release of so much being held in. And he looked at me and said, I needed that. He said that meant so much. That hug meant so much to me. I needed that.
We
And when I
always
see and when I see young kids who are, these hardened, what society says, these thugs or these criminals or anything like that, I embrace them and I tell them, hey, give me a hug. And then look at me and say, what? I'm like, don't make it weird. Just give me a hug. You need this right now. And when they
powerful.
embrace, it's you can feel the release of society. You can feel the release of the oppression. You could feel the release of sorrow, of the trauma in that moment. It's him and I. And you can feel the vulnerability, and you can feel the transformation that he has in that moment, because he probably has not had a hug in so long.
Mm.
And
I
so that's
it
one of my
makes
moments
me
I love.
think, when we were working with those youth early on, that's why I think that's part of our leadership journey today, because we saw so much. Obviously you grew up out here, so you've seen it your whole life, but then working with young Black men in a cognitive and in a highly emotional state, and talking about their issues in education and in healthcare, it adds a different layer, and it does make you realize that, hey, these guys just really need somebody who's going to root for them. How many of those youth looked at us as surrogate fathers or uncles or big brothers? I get calls today. I haven't worked in that role in what, almost 15 years, and getting calls from these kids in their 30s. Well, they're in their 30s now, and they're saying, thank you.
Hmm.
I want to introduce you to my children. Thank you for being someone who actually didn't see me just as a criminal,
Hmm.
or, who saw the possibility of me being able to go to college or to become a minister. And some of them still struggle, but the fact that they know there's somebody who has their back,
Yep.
like all of my guys out there, I saw them as sons of mine. That's why I don't have any kids, because I'm like, I've raised too many people's kids already. So
I
I'm
ran into
past.
one at I did a thing on mental health at Compton Community College, and I had one kid. He was an old kid from. He was one of our kids, and he was sitting in the audience, and he came up to me. He was like, "CJ," and I was like, "Yes," and he goes, "You don't remember me?" And I was like, "Brother, you look grown." So he was like, I was there at the ranch with you and James," and he was like, "Can I have a hug?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." Gave him a hug, and he was like, "Man, I just been through so much." He was like, "Man, I needed that." And he was like, "I always remember you and James and Brandy. Like, y'all was my family, and y'all helped me. I'm here now in college now. I finally, I'm trying to get focused, get my life together." And I was like, "You know what? I'm proud of you." And he's like, that meant so much to him to hear that. Even my kids to this day, older kids who I worked with, I still keep in touch with them. One of the things they told us not to do, I like to go against the grain. I'm a disruptor, right? And so
Some might
I
call me the
still,
same. It
yeah,
depends
right.
on where
And
you meet me at.
so I still talk with these kids to this day, the Rodres, what I mean? Like those kids and speaking life into them. And when I had a moment after my father passed of being vulnerable in this world, and there's a transactional piece when you pour into others and you allow them to pour back into you, it it fills their cup too, because then it makes them feel like they have like I was able to, they have this idea I was able to at least say something to uplift someone who meant so much to me in a point in my life when
Yeah.
I felt like I didn't mean anything. And so many of these young kids reached out to me and said, I'm praying for you. I'm sorry about the passing of your father. And, you know, if you need anything, let me know. I'm in a different state, but I want to come support, and just being able to say something to me
Wow.
meant a lot to them. And I allowed them because I knew it wasn't about me, it was for them. And this was powerful for them. And I just appreciated them. Now some of them in their early, late 20s, like you said, 30s, and just being and still trying to get it together. Right. And as we all
Still,
are, still trying to get it together, but being able to be there for me after I was there for them through so much of their life was monumental. And like you said, at the ranch, we were brothers to people. We were father figures. We
we
taught them how to
buried we
eat.
buried our kids.
We buried them. We taught them how to shave. We taught them how to talk to
Man.
women, how to respect women. Right? Like we didn't
Well,
allow
I
for
did.
them.
I taught them how to respect women. I can't
Hey,
speak
and
for
when you left,
everybody.
and when you left, it was ridges, boots to add. Like, don't you ever disrespect a woman in this
You
place.
remember I used to be on next. Like,
Oh
y'all don't
man,
want to have a conversation with me. You get this black male feminist energy. And like in closing, Dr. Brown, it's funny because I have these same situations, but it's whenever you hear somebody say CJ or James, you already know what time it is because they don't know you as Dr. Golden. So if I hear James or Mr. Golden, then I know that I'm like, oh, okay, we're about to travel back for a second.
absolutely. Enjoy it.
I want to take a moment to say thank you for the work that you do. You are living Black history, whether you realize that or not. You have changed the lives of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people through your selfless and tireless work throughout the years. It's not just the people that you touch, it's their entire families, their communities, the people who will benefit because of the light that you have shown and because of how you've shown up on this earth with your students, with your mentees, and with even the people that you've looked to for support that you have supported when we needed you as well. So I'm proud of you. I'm thankful for you. And I love you, brother. And I mean that. And keep on keeping on.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the platform. I appreciate it. And to anyone who's ever needs some support, I'm always here. I respond to everything, so I'm always down to help support. Shout out to I'm also a proud Black Matador alumni. I sit on the board as the Black Alumni President, and we're having an event where we're going to be taking over the Premier America Arena for the men's basketball game and uplifting the Black community, especially in a time right now where so much is going on. So many people's lives have been affected, and so we're doing this to uplift, and this is a free event for everyone, and we're going to be raising money to give to families and to those communities out there to help strengthen and show them that we are our brothers and our sisters. You know what I mean? Like,
Beautiful.
we lean on each other, and so we got you. So I'm excited.
Dr. Brown, you got to come back. Thank you for
Yes, sir.
everything. God bless you.
Yes, sir.
Wasn't that everything I told y'all? It was going to be off the hook. And so I'm really excited. Think about some of the things that we just talked about today: the power of mentorship, the power of community as we are moving through these leadership spaces. And being a transformational leader, don't just collect a check, don't just tell people what to do, but seriously use your leadership position to pour into others. Janet Jackson was right. The state of the world is really rough right now, but we have the ability as leaders to end her song and make it irrelevant. It's still going to be the jam, though. God bless you all. Be purposeful, be leaders, be healed. Till next week, see y'all later.